So 4 years ago, my husband had a crisis that we're planning for him to come on here and share for himself because it's not mine to share. And it was one of those things that we now lovingly look back on and call it a crisis, right? During the crisis, it was an absolute shit show, and we had zero clue what this would look like. We were navigating us, we were very seriously talking separation and really kind of panicked and just like, what do we do but just call it quits and just say like this can't be done, right? And he and I also got together. We were friends from the time we were 19, 20, and then we got together at like 22, 23, and we had been committed since then. And so we were just these kids who just didn't know better, who spent every day almost at this local bar that we were constantly hanging out in. This was just part of like the narrative of our relationship. And so when we then became parents so quickly and without much planning, it then just kind of rocked us and it overwhelmed our ability to cope with it as we knew it. And then we were just these kids who just didn't know any better, didn't know how to react any better. And so while his rock bottom was much deeper than mine had to get, what I witnessed by proxy and what I experienced by proxy was enough. And being able to see and being fortunate enough that we, of course, had these two kids that kind of pushed us over that edge, right? Because we, it's a world rocking experience to become a parent. We were fortunate, and we still are, that our kids were 1 and nearly 4 at this time. So our eldest was affected. He saw the fights. He saw the not cute behaviors. And my rock bottom in that moment was seeing my son in these moments when one fight got wild, and wild for us, which is, of course, more tame in comparison, thank God for us. There was that part that I looked back at my son and I saw his face. And that was kind of enough for me at that time of like, okay, like this is where I draw the line. This is where my anxious attachment is no longer important. Here's where my codependency now does not get to win each time. And that was where I really drew that line. From there, things got so much harder and also so much better little by little that, yeah, we were able to really see the world through our kids' lens. And when we are trying to break these patterns and break these generational curses of poor coping, of traumas, of these types of things, we had it right there in our face of this is it. Like, this is how these things start. We assume we always have time, but we don't. And that it becomes more of our reason. And so in some ways, I'm aware that we likely wouldn't have gotten to the depths of this shit had we not become parents. And we are far, far beyond any realm of healed than I ever thought that we could get to, nor do I think that we would have gotten to had we not become parents. And so this whole thing of rock bottom, I have this anecdotal theory that our rock bottom just has to either meet or exceed our original, the original one that caused us so much harm and chaos and destruction in our childhood that then comes into our adulthood, right? So that experience for my husband met or exceeded any of the traumas that he had in his upbringing. And that's why I'm a firm believer that that's what it took for him to open up to sobriety, to work his steps time and time and time again, and maintain this level of sobriety that he is living within. And that whole experience, it's going to look different for everyone. And I do agree that some of us need the full heart attack before we start working through these things. And some of us need to see someone experience it for long enough that it kind of jolts us back into this level of like, oh shit, this is the time. We either continue doing this longer or we appreciate that I was 50 when this happened instead of being 51. Right? Like we get to get ahead of it as quickly as possible. And then we have the rest of our experience to really not undo, but repair what's already been done.
I love that you shared that. And I've not heard that take before about the the rock bottom or the pivotal moment needing to be connected to what you experienced in childhood. So I absolutely love that perspective. And I'd also like to share a hot take, like one of my most controversial opinions. And mind you, I'm not a PhD doctor. I'm just a human behavior specialist. But one of my hot takes is that it's lazy to name or call anything hereditary. So if we just say like, oh, it's hereditary because I got it like my parents and my parents' parents, like, yes, there might be some genes that switch on and off. Obviously, now with studies in epigenetics, we know that environments are far more important than the genes. And what is hereditary, though, are two things. One is the trauma that we pass down to the next generation, that is hereditary. And the lack of self regulation and coping skills. That's hereditary, because if a parent doesn't know how to self regulate or cope, then they're going to pass down that inability and lack of skill set to their kids. But when that also puts us into that radical responsibility or unreasonable responsibility space, driver's seat of our lives, versus saying like, oh, it's just happening because, like it's in my family, right? Like, I don't find that's very useful or helpful.
Yeah, when my husband went to his first AA meeting, I went along with him. And it was a men's group, and thankfully they were open to me being there to witness it. And one man in there, who eventually became my husband's sponsor, he had said, regardless of how you were raised, regardless of what you inherited, regardless of any of these things, you're not to blame for them. And you're now responsible. And it was one of those just like mic drop, soul rocking comments, right? That isn't all that profound, but it's something that we don't quite hear very often. That immediately my husband we kind of looked at each other and nodded, and we both sobbed. And it became this kind of mantra that we live our life by, is that no, we're not to blame for our parents, it being their first time living too, and them just not quite knowing any different or how to be different and having their own, of course, challenges. We do now, though, not only have the responsibility, but we have the opportunity to work through that, right? And so I hear that entirely. It is a very hot take, and I'm sure we would have plenty of people ready to rebut it. I have a master's. I am not trained enough in the hereditary biological side of it. And at the root of what you're sharing, though, is that, right? That we can take these things, we can recognize how they've contributed, and then what do we do about it? What kind of care team do we need around us to address these types of things so that we aren't constantly held victim or held back by what these experiences may have been? And so I love the hot take. I'm not sure about it. And at the root of it, though, is this. That's what you're encouraging, is that sometimes we do get kind of stuck in this, like, well, my dad was an alcoholic, and so yeah, that's why I am, or this is just, it runs in my family. We have bad genes, these types of things. But what that again does is it doesn't empower us. It gives us reasons to stay stuck. It gives us reasons. It almost kind of feels like it's validation and permission to not rise, to not heal, to not recover, to not do the work.
Yeah.
And so I love that.
I love that you put a pretty bow around that. And sometimes the controversial opinions, the hot takes, sometimes we need to be triggered a little bit or just jolted out of our like stagnation, or out of this like
Yeah.
drone-like existence. And I used to go around saying triggers are medicine, triggers are medicine. Here's your medicine, 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 medicine. And I had this very loving friend say to me, Anna, triggers can be medicine, but they also can not be medicine. And so I'm a lot more mindful now because yeah, triggers can be medicine, and I love to approach triggers as medicine. I've actually recently just experienced a trigger with my partner, and I'm like, I have to explore this trigger now, and it's like, my opportunity to take responsibility and like look at this trigger, and I don't want to, but I have to, but I know if I don't, then there'll be another opportunity to see the same trigger over and over again, because what we resist persists, right? And the same thing often shows
Right.
up over and over again until we do look at it. And that's why I choose to live by the mantra that triggers are medicine. For me, it doesn't mean it's for like that for everyone else, because everyone's on a different path and, different parts of their journey and healing and evolution and everything. And who am I to say, triggers are medicine? Just because they are, I choose to see them like that for myself. And the clients who do work with me choose to see that for themselves as well.
Yeah, and there is something there that came to my mind when you shared that, is that we, hang on, I lost it. Where'd my brain go? Oh,
Triggers.
yes. So oftentimes, whenever these triggers come up, whenever these things really do present, I I am a firm believer that we are more consciously aware of how unhelpful they are for us, right? Like these behaviors, these habits, these escapisms, these things. And what I think we all need is just more evidence that I can work through it. When we're first starting to do this work, that's kind of just what keeps us stuck, is that I have had all of this history, all of this evidence that I'm broken, that I'm fractured, that I won't be able to make it through, whatever this narrative that we've adopted is, that we've likely made small attempts, maybe even large attempts at being able to remedy them, and they just haven't succeeded. We haven't succeeded within these attempts. So then I have more evidence that no matter what I do, things just won't get better. And what I've been able to recognize within this, and of course within my practice, is being able to help all of us find more and more evidence in very small, like micro ways that addressing this does benefit me. And even if it doesn't benefit me right away, it does in the long term. And so with that, when you recognize this trigger that came up with you and your partner, and it's like, oh, okay, all right, all right, all right. So I either recognize it now and start doing the ick, that gross work in order to push through and get to the other side of it now, or I just wait and allow for it to destroy more and more. And so that like kind of pivot, that shift in perspective that I'm desperate for a lot of us to get to, is that I have more evidence that this is harming me. I have more evidence that I'm getting more and more sick of my own shit than I do in the possibility of attempting something different. So even if I try something different and I fail, I'm still failing differently. And that's still evidence that I can try new and different ways of getting there. And so this is, I think, my unintentional but very welcome segue into habits. And I want to learn all about them. In full transparency, I've always worked within, that's actually inaccurate. I'm gonna edit that. I hadn't quite operated in my practice, in my coaching, as somebody who is inherently flawed. I was trained, my master's is in forensic psychology, so I did very rigid prison work, these types of things that have very clear boundaries of you do this or you do not do this, incredibly boundaried to the point where if people ask me what my last name is, if a client asks me my last name, I don't share it. I ask them why it's important to know, right? So I was trained so deeply boundaried that when I opted out of traditional therapy, because it is just not for me, I don't think everyone needs a diagnosis, and I don't think that that's what we should be focusing on. I went into the coaching realm, the anger management, conflict resolution, conflict tolerance more than anything, and mediation in order to recognize and help other people see that we are just illiterate. We are emotionally illiterate. We are lacking coping skills. This is a psychoeducational problem, not this pervasive diagnosis problem. And so once I did that, there became this new and different way that I approached the work, which was by sharing about my experiences, by sharing about my and my husband's challenges, my own personal challenges. And so all of that shared to say that I need more focus. I would benefit so greatly from doing more habit work. I pick them up for a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks, and then something comes through and I give myself a yes day. I'm like, yeah, okay, you can sleep in yet. Yeah, okay, you can eat all of this sugar and dyes and gluten because I'm normally gluten free. I give myself so much permission because it feels like I've quote unquote earned it in that moment. And then before I know it, one day turns into a week, turns into a month. And then I'm sitting here in front of you with my face all bloated, woke up late, feel like shit. And then I'm like, all right, sick of my own shit again. Let me get back on. So my question to you is, how do you guide people in here, namely me, into making these things more of daily habits and getting away from the idea that I've earned harming myself through poor coping?